Hi, my name is Allie Cloth, and this is the second in a series of three modules for needs-based mentoring training. This one is focused on motivational interviewing basics, and I am fortunately a member of the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. Here's a list of some of the things we'll accomplish in this module. I'll talk with you a little bit about an introduction to motivational interviewing. I'll go over the core principles and techniques and skills. And then I'll talk a little bit about how do you know you're doing it right or well. Then I'm going to lead you to review and practice on your own, provide you some online resources for you to watch motivational interviewing in action. And then I'll also lead you to conduct a small group practice on your own with your team. So, what is motivational interviewing if you're not familiar with it yet? Motivational interviewing is a collaborative and client or student-centered, goal-oriented approach to communication about behavior change. We do this by focusing on students saying anything about their needs or their desire, ability, and reasons for change. And then exploring and talking about with them, as well as helping them resolve any ambivalence, which we all might have with regard to changing behavior. So, motivational interviewing comes with a spirit of the background of humanism and psychology, humanistic psychology. And it is really all about collaboration, acceptance, evocation, compassion, and empowerment. We work with the client. We don't do things to or on them or at them. We have a feeling of absolute worth for the person sitting in front of us and try for accurate empathy. And we also help to support their autonomy at all times. All decisions with regard to change are in their court. We also evoke and help draw out the student or client and help them explore their thoughts and feelings about the different things we're talking about. We want to be compassionate and benevolently seek and value the client's welfare and give priority to their needs. That's why my mentoring approach is called needs-based mentoring. It's really focused on their needs and goals. We also want to empower the students we're working with, help them identify and use their own strengths and talents to work on this journey of life, as well as the journey of behavior change. Here are some quotes that embody the spirit of motivational interviewing, and you can come back and read those at your leisure. I will say, they mostly say, we want to change when we ourselves think of the best reasons for it, not when those reasons come from someone else. Additionally, we want to treat the students we work with like the best selves that they potentially may be and that they want to be. So, how do we discover the MI spirit in ourselves? Sometime you can just pause this and just read through some of the questions or statements and answer them to yourself and think about how that made you feel. So some of them are who listened to your story, who had deep acceptance and appreciation for you in your life, who treated you as somebody special with talents and strengths and brought out the best in you, who surprised you by treating you as an equal, as a collaborator, who might have guided you towards something you really wanted to do, and who is someone who seemed really committed to helping you succeed. These people embody the spirit of motivational interviewing. Just some more about the spirit of motivational interviewing. There's a wonderful article that I can send you if you get in touch with me. My information is at the end of this module. But it's called Dancing, Not Wrestling, and that is really an appropriate um, uh, embodiment of the spirit of MI. It's all about collaboration and not confrontation. And ambivalence towards change does not necessarily equate to resistance to change. And resistance to change doesn't necessarily equate to a lack of insight. We want to normalize ambivalence and thereby normalize some resistance to change. We all like things that are familiar and comfortable. It's hard to, shake some of that out, and we want to help our mentee do such. More about the spirit includes eliciting and evoking and drawing out the client versus imposing thoughts or feelings or beliefs or judgments. None of that. We also want to support real autonomy versus this idea of authority. In fact, youth make life-changing decisions every day. And if they're not coming to school or they're doing things that are not necessarily in their best interest, authority is not what's going to change that. Really coming alongside them, inquiring about it, being curious about it, really connecting with them and being open with them is more likely to help. Other things that I like to bring up when it comes to the spirit of motivational interviewing include having just an uncluttered mind when you're working with somebody. Often I find myself coming up with what I want to say to somebody before they're finished in my regular personal life. And that is something that I've really learned to curb when I'm working with someone using motivational interviewing, a client, a student, things like that. And that's something that we can really utilize mindfulness practices to get us in gear to be our best motivational interviewing selves. And something it's strange for me to talk about it, but because there is no hierarchy and it is all about collaboration, almost no part of motivational interviewing is all about you. It's all about the student and your ability to strategically reflect and mirror back who they are to themselves. We'll go over ways to share of yourself with them, but that has to come with rapport and time. I'll talk a little bit about the overview of MI and the core principles and techniques now. And that's the bulk of our work together. So, motivational interviewing was developed, I want to say in the late 80s, by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick. It is considered a brief intervention method that was largely used at first with adults who were overcoming substance abuse. And I will be happy to talk more about that with you if we have any other time together to discuss it. It's a wonderful story. So, to date, now that it's been used for over 35 years, or approximately 35 years, it has been used effectively with a lot of different populations, cross-culturally around the world, and with different difficult to treat problems. I'll talk a little bit about the contributing theories, core principles, the process of motivational interviewing, and then the skills, techniques, and strategies. We will be focusing on both ORs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, as well as change talk, focusing on change talk. So there's a rumor, no, there isn't, but some people say that MI is atheoretical, and I have to disagree. I think it's born on lots of wonderful foundations, including Carl Rogers and client-centered therapy, Prochaska and DiClemente's trans-theoretical model of change, Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory, Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory, and then Festinger and Bem add a nice richness to the texture of the theory behind why motivational interviewing might work. One is cognitive dissonance. We don't like to not make sense to ourselves, if that makes sense. But so if we're smoking and we're running, we enjoy running, but we also enjoy smoking. both of those aren't necessarily going to make sense side by side forever. So we're going to have to kind of make sense about it to ourselves over time. That could be becoming a lifelong smoker, or on the better flip side, becoming a lifelong runner. That's just one example. But then there's self-perception, where we like to make sense to ourselves with what we say and do. So we can hear ourselves, hear who we are through our speech and through our actions. If you haven't heard about the trans-theoretical model of change, it's a really interesting idea that change isn't just flipping a switch. We have to go through different kinds of things as we move from stage to stage in the pathway to making a change or creating a new habit. And these include, we're pre-contemplative. We don't foresee or think of this thing in our lives as being a problem. There's no need for change. Another word for it could be denial. Then there's contemplation. You're considering a change. Then there's preparation, where it's slightly more imminent. You're readying for that change. Then there's action, where you're actually implementing the plan for change. And then the toughest part comes, maintenance. Maintenance is actually day to day, living through it all the time, not making any changes, accepting the change. And some people may think it's easy at that point, but it's actually not. It's quite hard, and we have to manage our triggers, our boundaries, all the things that make that change important to us, and maintaining it. And then there's something called relapse. And this is just a redirection back to the plan, and prep and action. It is not the time to throw up our hands and say, there goes that. It's just back to the drawing board, because relapse happens. So I'll go over some of the evolution of motivational interviewing, because I've enjoyed its evolution. I enjoyed all four books. We are currently on the fourth edition of helping prepare people for change and growth. I believe that's the title of the most recent. And some of the original core principles in the first two editions were a nice little alliteration that really was so palatable when it came out. And I glommed right onto it. I thought it was fantastic. So these are expressing empathy, developing the discrepancy between what they're doing and what their goals are, rolling with resistance, which means basically you don't duke it out. You stay with them in their resistance, you reflect that back to them, you find out more about it, you become curious. And then there was supporting self-efficacy. So moving forward with a plan, feeling, giving them feelings of competence, readiness, connection to make that change. In the third and fourth editions, we've moved into the four processes, and these are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. And these make sense as sort of stages. And they also reflect some of the things I talk about in the NBM manual, or I reflect their questions in the NBM manual. I think they are a wonderful addition in the fourth edition. So the questions that came alongside these processes include, in engaging, can we walk together? In focusing, kind of asking the question, where are we going? In evoking, it's why do you want to go there? And with planning, it's so how do you want to get there? So how do we go through these processes, and what are some of the core techniques to getting there, or through and with our clients and students through each process? The overarching framework of motivational interviewing relies on OARS as an acronym. This acronym stands for open-ended questions, where we evoke and explore things with our mentee. Affirm or affirmations, when we engage and empower them to notice their growth, notice their progress, affirm any step in the right direction. We also reflect and draw out and mirror what they're saying to them in reflections. And then we summarize, all for, conveying our understanding. Perhaps we're asking for clarifications, but we summarize what we are hearing them say so they feel heard. So there are two types of change talk that we'll talk about. One is preparatory, and one is more mobilizing or action oriented. So preparatory change talk is any statement that a mentee or student or client has or says about their desire, ability, reason, or need to change. Mobilizing change talk sounds like commitments, activation, and or taking steps in all of those goal making directions, goal achieving directions. So other core techniques, we'll get into a bunch of other ones besides OARS now. One is that helpers often suffer from what we call a writing reflex. Basically, this is, as I say right there, a fixing reflex, where it's like, well, have you tried, and uh, do you know about, and we try and help somebody right away. But that's not necessarily about them. That's actually about us and our knowledge and our desire to help and our desire to share. Who knows why? But really, we need to restrain or restrict ourselves from doing that in order to do something a little bit more autonomy supportive. So, what we want to do is it used to be called elicit, provide, elicit. Now it's called ask, offer, ask. What we want to do when we feel that writing reflex is we want to ask permission to share. And the student or client can just say yes or no. And we have to abide by that. So if they say no, that's okay. Maybe we'll get to it again later. Maybe we'll ask their permission again at another time and they might say yes. Or if they say yes, what we want to do is offer our suggestion, our information, our education, our counsel, our anything, advice. And then we want to follow up with another question. How did that sound to you? What do you think about that? Or how did that land with you? One of the things we should always know about motivational interviewing is that it is on the continuum of communication considered guiding communication. It's not directing, it's not authoritative, authoritarian in any way, but it's also not following. We are at times trying to steer the conversation, and that is the guiding part. There may be more following at the outset and then more guiding further down the road. Here are some examples and a little bit more fleshed out information about each of the letters in the acronym OARS. So open-ended questions allow for evocation and really help the client to explore thoughts and feelings. So an example is, what do you think would happen maybe if you decided to change this part of your life? Tell me more about how your attendance affects your different relationships. Non-examples are things that end up with a one word or yes or no answer. Do you think you're ready to change? Or do you think attendance would be easier if you had different friends or if you lived closer? Affirmations are again about affirming the client or student's personal choices, and they can impact feelings of self-efficacy. I'm really impressed with how you went to the main office to ask for a bus pass. That's an example of an affirmation. So, a non-example regarding the first example up there, you cut down on the times you got high this past week. That's impressive. You weren't sure you could do it, but you did. The non-example is you cut down on how many times you got high this week, but you didn't get to the number we had discussed. There's so much judgment in that last non-example that it's not affirming in any way. So there are simple and complex affirmations, and this is now in keeping with there were simple and complex reflections, which we'll talk about next, for a long time. And here in affirmations, a simple affirmation is, right on. What a great idea. Something that, smacks of positivity. A complex affirmation is a little bit more depthful and a bit about their choices and character or traits than just a simple right on. So a complex affirmation might be that took a lot of courage. You really care about the people closest to you. You don't want to see it take a toll on others. So these are all different examples I've written. You've gotten through a lot of hard things before, so this is just another thing for you to get through, huh? These are all good examples. As I said, there are complex and simple reflections as well. Here we are in the R. There's also reflections of meaning, like a label that they identify with or don't identify with, and that comes up. But there are also reflections of feeling, the way their face, gets red or their eyes sort of tear up when they're speaking about something. And these can offer you an opportunity to reflect their feelings. One of the Mint trainers that I worked with when I was first learning motivational interviewing in like 2008 was Stephen Andrews, a licensed social worker out of Portland, Maine, who was my trainer. And more recently, I've heard him talk about the whispers of trauma. And so some of this might come out in some of the youth that you work with, where they say these kinds of overarching um, beliefs about themselves or core beliefs like, I don't matter, or the world is an unsafe place, or I'm unlovable. And those are also places to reflect the feeling that they're having as more of a trauma-informed way. Summaries are an opportunity for you to both clarify and share your understanding of what your mentee is talking about and going through. So, Terry Moyers, one of the four mothers of motivational interviewing, says of summaries, while someone is talking to you, they give you one flower at a time for each of the statements that are involved in the conversation. And then the summary that you provide back is really you giving them a bouquet. So here's an example. What I hear you telling me is that you know it gets you into legal trouble and it's expensive, but you're not sure if you're ready for a change. That's one kind of summary. A lot of people don't necessarily like or believe in sentence stems that I have there, but I'm the kind of person who says whatever helps. If that helps you move it along and remember how to say things, that's fine too. So, as you become more entrenched in motivational interviewing, you'll notice and realize that reflections are a major focus and really where you should pretty much hang out if you're in a mentor-mentee session and you are just getting to know them, you're starting engagement, things like that. You should really find yourself responding in a mirror sort of way. You can add things to that, which we'll learn about now, but Largely, you want to try and reflect at a rate of approximately 3 reflections to every one question. That's high, but it will help the conversation move along as they feel heard. So here are the types of reflections. There's a simple reflection, kind of like paraphrasing, and it's neutral but can elicit other responses. You want to try and use their language in as much as it feels safe and comfortable for you to do so. Then there's amplified reflections, and it might slightly exaggerate, but definitely without sarcasm, the kinds of thing that they're saying. And we'll go through examples of these as well. Then there's my favorite, the double-sided reflection, sharing both sides of the for and against change that a person is sharing with you, to contrast what's going on for that conflicted, ambivalent individual. So you're acknowledging what they're saying and contrasting it with their previous statements. Then there is another complex reflection called shifting focus. So this can be shifting away from barriers, um, affirming feelings, choices, and coping mechanisms, or just moving the conversation a little bit in a better direction. This is similar to, in a way, agreeing with a twist. So you might agree with them about sustain feelings or sustain talk, and then uh, helping them notice um, what might propel the conversation forward, or again, maybe taking a different angle to it, agreeing with a twist. Again, we'll go over an example in a moment. And then there's the age-old reframe. So this is just new and positive interpretations of information that they provide or that you can provide them to offer new meaning and new opportunities for them to consider. So here is a simple reflection. You feel good when you're high, and it sounds like you do it with friends. So in a way, it's a way of connecting socially for you. An amplified reflection. I don't know why my mom is so worried about this. I don't really drink, not the way some of my friends do. So the counselor or the mentor says, so you feel like your mom is just being a nag. You can see how that word nag might elicit some response on the student's part of, no, she just cares about me, or yeah, I mean, thanks for hearing me, you know. The double-sided reflection, you want to try and use the word and, not but. Sometimes I forget to do that. So the counselor mentor says, you aren't getting along with your mom and you don't want to run away again because then she said she'll send you to live with your aunt. And you've said that's not what you want to do. You want to be able to finish high school here with your friends. Shifting focus. The mentor says, you did some great work, and maybe it's the first time you worked towards hard at something that you really enjoyed that fit your interests. And the student says, yeah, totally. So why do I need to bust my butt doing homework or keeping my grades up when I can just keep working and making money? And the mentor comes back with, as you consider your choices, you're wondering what might help keep your focus on school. Another reflection, complex reflection, is agreeing with a twist. So the student says, you drink too if your family bugged you all the time. And the counselor mentor comes back with, you've got a good point. There's a bigger picture here. And maybe I haven't been paying attention to that. It's not as simple as your drinking. Tell me more about how your family impacts your drinking. And reframe or reframing. But I've tried to quit so many times. You're persistent. Even though you're discouraged, this is a change that's important to you. You've tried it before to make it happen. You'll make it happen. So another look at the reframe, again, it's as old as time. So turning problem statements into goals, working to help accept emotions or actions as normal or in the normal range, because change is tough for all of us. Look at a perceived weakness as a strength. Recognize triggers as opportunities to try something new. Explore possible positive outcomes of these challenges. Another MI technique or skill is the idea of continuing the paragraph. So it is more notable in the fourth edition and it gives more good examples, but it's been there a while. And it's basically taking a guess with a reflection about something that's thus far unspoken. So it's almost akin to, or how I think about it is like bringing up the possible elephant in the room. So in this example, a this is not a student example. So in this example, the adult male is having his wife actually want to go back to school, and he's having a hard time with that because it opens up her whole world a little differently. So here, the husband says, "We're doing okay," and she has plenty to do. So the counselor says, "You like things the way they are, and it feels like a big change, and you're worried if she goes back to school, things may not be as good as they are now." So only I call it MI Strategies 2.0. That's sort of the more intermediate and advanced ideas of MI strategies. But these are other wonderful ideas to keep in your toolbox as you approach your motivational interviewing conversations. First, of course, exploring interests and values using ORs. Looking forward or looking back. Looking forward to a time when this wouldn't be a problem, or you've made it out of school. What are you going to do next? Or looking back. When was this not a problem in the past? What was going on for you then? How have you changed? How have things changed? How has school changed? Um, Developing the discrepancy again between current behaviors and goals. And therein you can share given ask, offer, ask as a framework. You can discuss feedback from the environment. You can also latch onto change talk using ORs, reflecting, and asking open-ended questions. Rating scales we'll briefly talk about, so I'll hold that off until next. And then decision balance, talking about the pros and cons of changing and not changing. You want to do this with care as you want to end on a positive note about change potentially, and or you need to be able to stay neutral. So if a student's talking with you about leaving school, it's not that easy to stay neutral. Although maybe you have great ideas for how they can leave school well. That's another whole area of focus that we could have. And then there's action planning. So this is not at all advanced MI. It's right there in the mix, but you have to do it with the support of their autonomy, and they really have to initiate goal setting. You can collaborate on steps to that goal, things like that, but you need to, or you want to action plan with them as an active participant. So as I said, I wanted to talk briefly about rating scales. These are the kinds of scales that you want to ask about the confidence they have about their ability to engage in a change step and also the importance that it has for them. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not important at all to 10 being the most important thing in your world right now, how important is changing this behavior? But you don't want to stop there and then have a conversation about why they answered 4 or 5. You want to ask the follow-up questions directly after. Um, so let's go to the next slide, I think. Oh, my arrows are already there. That was supposed to be animated. But let's say they answered, it's about a 5. The first thing you want to ask is, tell me a little bit about why it wasn't a 3. So you really elicit some of the ideas of what's important to them about it. And then the next follow-up question you want to have is, how do we make it more like a 6 or a 7? What little steps can we take together that will help you um, bring it up? Or you could ask, what would a 9 look like? The same thing with confidence. One of the things we know about the difference between the importance of engaging in a change and the confidence someone has about engaging in that change is often the importance is a little higher than their confidence about making it happen. Just to keep that in mind. Here are some thoughts and ideas about the decision balance. So the benefits and costs of changing or not changing. Uh, if kids don't have all the nuances of these 4 areas, you can just talk about the pros and cons. So getting closer to planning, we have the opportunity to self-assess or self-reflect as mentors to determine if our mentee is showing signs of readiness to change. Is there some decreased sustained talk, that idea that they want to keep things exactly the way they are? Is there less talk about the problem? Has there been some expressed intention to change? Are they recognizing some of the disadvantages of the status quo? Is there some increased change talk? And my favorite, are there some questions about change? Well, how would I even do that? Is a great example. Um, then there's envisioning or imagining hypothetical change, expressing optimism and exploring life without that behavior or that problem. And then there's, of course, experimenting with change. And I think it's funny that I am quoting a nicotine patch commercial, but it's one of the best ideas ever. Every great why needs a great how. So here we are in planning. When we get sort of almost to planning, we want to also test the water. So moving from the why to the how of change, when they're showing those signs of readiness to change, and we don't yet have a step-by-step plan, one of the things we can do is give a summary of what they were talking about and then end that summary with, so where does that leave you? Or what are you going to do? What's your next step? Those are really nice ways of just testing the water. And they may just come back to you with, I don't know, but that's something you can explore. It's important in action planning to discuss anything that has been tried or worked before, setting a realistic but doable and meaningful goal, and having it be brief in duration and have it be also a specific behavior, um, that they're able to give some thoughts about the where, why, how much, how often, things like that about. Then you also want to review the triggers, the obstacles and barriers to making the change happen, as well as the resources. What's their net? What do they fall back on? What are some of their resources when going through something a little challenging? It's also a good opportunity to teach and review problem solving. There's an easy 4 or 5 step process in the manual, the guidebook, but it also is just basically identify the problem, list lots of different kinds of solutions, be creative, then pick out one you think will work, use it, and reevaluate. Did that work, or do you need to go back to the list of ideas? Also, have them share the goal or the plan or the steps with an important person, with an important other. And that I am getting from Reagan North and his book on motivational interviewing for school counselors. This helps, a little extra accountability, also a little extra celebration, if it's done, and potentially some sympathies if it's not, and that's okay too. Empathy would be awesome, but sympathy is usual. And get a commitment to working on that first step together. And for each one that is successful, reinforce it. And if it's unsuccessful, revise the plan, talk about it, and try again. Here's just where I introduce the idea that the motivational interviewing, the stages of change can be mapped onto by the MI techniques. So you can use different techniques for which stage the youth is with regard to their desire to work on changing their behavior. And NBM really says stay where they are. Don't jump ahead. Here are some of the techniques that you use at different stages of readiness to change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about change talk now, and then we'll move on, hopefully, to fidelity and practice things. In the fourth edition, Miller and Rolnick said that no one has zero or no ambivalence about beneficial change. So here are a bunch of ideas about how to move that along if there's a lot of um, resistance to change or that denial that no change is needed. First, mostly when we talk to youth and students about beneficial change or things that maybe aren't working so well for them, all the time we're doing that, we're planting seeds. So not every conversation can be measured and reported back about some outcome or impact or influence that it had. So many conversations go by, and for many years, maybe nothing happens, but then something clicks. Somebody said something at some point, and it was powerful and impactful to them. So we're always planting seeds. Sometimes motivation needs to be nurtured and encouraged. So one of the things we really need to do is encourage the trusting and safe relationship. How do we do that? We ask a lot of open-ended questions. We stay curious about their story. We reflect, we empathize, and we affirm. I honestly believe this is the ultimate place to practice motivational interviewing. It requires a lot of patience and a lot of faith, and hopefully will yield fruit. When you hear a student, with their ambivalence, again, stay curious, engage, and evoke. Learn about their interests and their values, sometimes tie their values to their goals, affirm where it's possible. And it's okay if they sound full of contradiction. You reflect that back to them with double-sided reflections. So this leads me to what I like to think of as the metaphor that this tale of two wolves created. Basically, that picking what to focus on in motivational interviewing can be seen as very akin to this story, where an old Cherokee told his grandson, "My son, there's a battle between two wolves inside us all, and one is evil, full of anger and jealousy and greed and bad things, and the other is good, and it's full of peace and love and hope." And the boy thought about it, and then he asked, "So which wolf wins?" And the grandfather said, "It's the one you feed." So here we're feeding beneficial change and we're feeding change talk. We're focusing on it. So as I transition into change talk and what it might look like, I like to have this Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that has gone through so many cut and pastes that it's no longer uh, able to be read. So Calvin says, "I like homework. Homework makes me happy." He's trying to make sense to himself, but that doesn't make sense. And he says, "I don't want to go outside. I just wanted to stay in and do math problems." And then he says, "Bleh. My brain always rejects attitude transplants." So We like to make sense to ourselves. Let's go ahead and try to look at change talk. Maybe you can hear yourself kind of coming up with some of it around some of the things you'd like to change sometime. Maybe cultivate it inside of you and get to know it. So here we are getting to change talk. What gets us to change talk? Things like building a good, safe, authentic, genuine, affirmative, positive rapport. Asking evoking questions, exploring values and priorities, asking for elaboration and examples, looking forward or looking back, exploring the decision balance and importance and confidence rulers, exploring fears, triggers, barriers, obstacles, querying extremes, asking permission to provide counsel or information before doing it, using complex reflections, exploring environmental feedback, and emphasizing personal responsibility and choice. Only you know. Here is again the list of both preparatory and mobilizing change talk words. And again, forgive me for sentence stems, but here are a couple of ways to initiate that conversation. And I want you to think of the goal or the thing that is attempting to be changed as a collective horizon, a shared horizon. So, in what ways would it be good for you to come to first block every day, or come to school more often, or start doing some of your missing assignments? If you were to decide you wanted to change, how might you go about it? If you don't change, what do you think is going to happen? And what would you want to change? Here are some change talk examples. I'm doing better about taking my meds. Sometimes I forget on the weekends, but I know it's not as good as it could be. Or so I think it's not as good as it could be. I know I need to pass math to graduate, but I hit a wall. I just don't understand what we're doing in there anymore. So there's expressing a need and a previous ability or no longer ability. I like drinking, but lately it's getting me into some trouble. I hate trying to quit smoking, but I really love exercise and being fit. So, one of the things that we as helpers using motivational interviewing need to do is we need to listen for the change talk. I end up teaching a lot of social work students at UBC, and they are all about the problem solving. And I love that about them. They're always boots on the ground. How do we get this done? What's the solution? And that's awesome. But using motivational interviewing is a slight trick for not doing that. So here's an example of how do you listen for change talk versus listening for problem solving. Just a nice example. I've been thinking I need to lose weight, so I went for a walk last week. Afterwards, my knee hurt so badly for 3 days. It was throbbing, mostly at night, so I laid down. I took some ibuprofen, but that didn't really help. So here's what you hear when you're listening for problem solving. The knee hurt badly, throbbing, laid down, took ibuprofen, that didn't work. Let's see, who do we need to see for this? What kinds of pain meds do you need? Yikes. Here's what we are hearing when we're listening for change talk. Really, that opportunity to affirm any step in the right direction. So I've been thinking I need to lose weight. So I went for a walk last week. We're not saying ignore the latter part. The latter part's important, but not as important as the change talk. So first, you really want to affirm and reflect. Wow, so you went for a walk. What made you feel like you could do that at that point? To take that big step, that change, things like that. And not focusing yet on the pain of the knee or the ibuprofen taken. But that will come in time. That's when you discuss the triggers and the obstacles. But really, first, you need to get to what is the change needed and how do we really reflect that back to them when they do it. So here are two examples of students listening for change talk. The first one says, I've been thinking I could get a C in math if I passed in more homework, so I stayed home last night and I did some, even though friends got together and I'm pissed because Robbie's hitting on my girlfriend and now I feel like I can't trust her when I'm not around. So that first part, I've been thinking I could get a C in math if I passed in more homework, so I did some last night. The second one is basically somehow I woke up early this morning and I caught the bus and it made me and I made it to first block. That doesn't happen every day, and I'm not sure I want it to. I was so tired at the end of the day. I was falling asleep at work, and my boss said, pay attention. I'm scared I'm going to lose my job. But again, woke up early, made it to the bus, made it to first block. Let's affirm and work on the rest. So here's, when am I is happening, when all of these good things are occurring. The counselor is talking, or the mentor is talking less than the client. There's a flexible pace. There are ratings happening. There's exploration of goals and values. There are also simple and complex reflections. You're working at the readiness to change stage of the mentee. You're asking more open-ended questions than closed-ended questions. You're assessing the benefits and costs of the target behavior and changing and coming up with a goal, planning, and committing. Motivational interviewing is not happening if there's a question and answer trap. Anybody's arguing for any side. When the counselor or mentor gives an unsolicited opinion, when there's labeling or judging happening, or the counselor or mentor is acting as an expert. The mentor jumps ahead of the readiness to change of the student mentor mentee, or there's negating or interrupting. Here are some of my very favorite motivational interviewing resources. There is the fourth edition, that third one in, the big blue, dark blue book. Then from my left to right, the Motivational Interviewing for School Counselors by Reagan North is a wonderful, easy read. Truly depicts exactly the kinds of things that counselors see all the time. He was a counselor for a long time. And then the second one is Motivational Interviewing in Schools. Also, a wonderful opportunity to even think about, am I at the universal school climate level? Really training everybody to treat each other this way might really elevate our conversation in general. Again, there's the fourth edition of Motivational Interviewing, helping people change and grow. And then the last one is Motivational Interviewing for Effective Classroom Management. This is something that I use in my school consultation class at UBC. I also wanted to introduce you guys to the motivationalinterviewing.org website. This can give you some information about us. Also has a library to look at studies or videos, things like that. That also will tell you who are trainers in your area. If you look on the trainers aspect, and they have different letters for each state or province or country in the world. You can look that up. Additionally, there are some videos to watch on different aspects of motivational interviewing in on this website by PsychWire. But if you just Google PsychWire, MI brief videos and info, it'll hopefully just pop up. So I wanted to let you guys know a little bit about how it's being used with youth. If you have further interest in motivational interviewing and how it's being used with youth, you can Google scholar search, um, motivational interviewing, and youth. And some of these will come up, but it is, as I said, with school-based consultation, substance abuse, binge drinking behavior, smoking cessation, medical procedure and or medication compliance, behavioral challenges, school attendance. And I worked for a little while on the health improvement project for teens at the University of Rochester Medical Center. And this was about youth using contraception. So that brings me almost to the tail end of our conversation together before I lead you off on different review and practice techniques, as well as watching MI and doing a group practice. Here is what's called the MIGHTY, which is Motivational Interviewing Treatment Integrity Measure, basically. And it is the coding sheet for motivational interviewing. Basically, there are global ratings at the top, behavior counts at the bottom. Global ratings are, one of them is enlarged here, but they're focused on evocation, collaboration, autonomy support, direction, and empathy. And here you can see how collaboration is fleshed out with definitions from low collaboration to high collaboration so that people are able to make judgments on how the interaction is going. So the extremes are the clinician actively assumes the role of expert. For the majority of the interaction with the client, collaboration is absent, all the way to 5 high, which is the clinician actively fosters and encourages power sharing in the interaction in such a way that the client's ideas are substantially influencing the nature of the session. Then behavior counts on the bottom. What happens there is the person who is coding the, let's say, 20 to 30 to 50-minute session, they're looking for tallying or behavior counting for each of these areas. A, giving information, being, am I adherent or non-adherent? So asking for permission, affirming, and supporting, or advising and confronting. Then there are the ors. Those are just tallied, closed-ended versus open-ended questions, simple and complex reflections. So those are the important aspects of knowing whether or not you're doing motivational interviewing well. So typically, I'm going to just scroll through these, but typically I would run a quick whip of help me make these closed-ended questions open-ended. And then I would ask for simple and complex reflections given a list of statements. Then I would look at engage versus focusing reflections and ask you which one fits the different categories. Then I'd ask you to recognize the change talk. And then I'd ask you to determine the stage of change that different statements sound like the person who said them is in. So I'm just going to flip slowly so you're able to pause at each one and work on it together with your team. What I did not say is that last one, highlighting change talk. With your team, you decide, I mean, in your team's meeting where you're practicing motivational interviewing and reviewing the skills, things like that. This is one of the ones where you can say there's no change talk at all. There's mobilizing, no, sorry, there's preparatory change talk, or two, there's mobilizing change talk. So no change talk, preparatory change talk, mobilizing change talk. And you can go through each of those. And the ones that are bolded, I use as examples. That's all. Here is a good example of a brief 7-minute interaction that I've been using for years because he it does enough that I can see and ask students what are some of the skills that he's using. Is he doing them well? What is he not maybe doing enough of? Or what's the pace of the conversation like? Things like that. And then debrief with your team. What did you notice? What techniques did you notice? What did they do well? What could you have done differently? Then this is the small practice that I use in groups of 3. This is the small group practice most mentees use with in their workshops. What you want to do is you want to do something called a real play. So this is not role playing, let me play the kid, you play the mentor, things like that. This is real play. So what you want to do is take something that you actually want to change within your life about yourself or your doings and make it something that's not too private that you can talk about at work, but something that you actually want to work on that you're feeling 2 ways about. So one of the things I have used is bringing my lunch to work because it's a hassle. It's just easier to buy something while I'm out. Or exercising is also a good example. Perhaps there's something different, losing weight, exercising more, quitting smoking, lots of different things you could choose from. I've also used doing my physio exercises more because I constantly have physio exercises and I do them like once a week, which isn't helping. So, what you want to do is break up into groups of 3 and practice the reflective listening. That's this first one, where there's one client and you're going to be the person who brings up the idea that you want to change. And then there's one counselor or mentor, and you are going to be using your MI skills with the quote unquote client. And then there's one coach, and the coach will be identifying the MI skills being used. And I want you to take notes on this sheet, if you can print that out. And what you want to do is do that for about 8 minutes each. Then you can debrief, have the coach give some of feedback that they saw to the counselor mentor, and then just switch one to the right and do it again. And what I want you to do is try for approximately 2 or 3 open-ended questions, maybe 3 or 4 open-ended questions in that 8 minutes, but try ultimately for between 6 and 10 simple and complex reflections. And I wish you all the best with that. It is the best way to practice motivational interviewing. And hopefully, if you're working with me on needs-based mentoring, I'm sure I will do this with you soon. This is the tally global rating sheet. I don't do global ratings, just tallies and examples. And when you debrief or discuss, you can talk about what your experience was as each role, what worked and what did not work while you were working with your colleagues on it. So this is something I wanted to end on. It's a thought exercise that I usually use for a break when I'm taking a break in a motivational interviewing workshop. I want us to think about changing our orientation towards change. In schools, we have a lot of feelings that we have as we go into and expectations that we have as we go into um, a meeting that's promoting behavioral change about a student, a parent, or a colleague. And what are those expectations that we already have going into those meetings? How do we feel when we're going into those meetings? And how can we kind of change our thinking? And one of the ways we can do that is think about something that we've tried to change about ourselves. How much time has passed between thinking about the change and starting to make a step towards change? And how much time passes between the first steps to success? Did we experience success? So behavior issues are not uncommon. They're extremely common, and the pace of change is definitely variable. So our knowledge of consequences or risks aren't necessarily sufficient for us to make change happen. And we need to hear our own intrinsic motivation, feel our own intrinsic motivation to make change happen. And relapse happens. Let's not stop there. Let's get back on the horse and keep it going. So, as I said, sometime during this session, please feel free to email me with questions or check out my blog, The Education Pusher, at the UBC blogs. Thank you so much for your time.